takes the control of taxes from the citizens and gives it back to the government. The thaw is unconstitutional. It creates a second taxing system on the same set of homeowners. Then last week, a new proposal was introduced. How confusing is this? I'm disappointed with my city council now for placing the thawing of the property tax assessment freeze on the ballot, which will be the largest tax increase in the history of Columbus, Georgia, without the benefit of at least a 2-week discussion. Placing the thawing of the property tax assessment freeze on the ballot in this manner is a severe and harsh slap in the face to the Columbus voters. The council needs to prove they will protect us by reconsideration on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to allow Alton Russell to take up the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Russell. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much. I'm Alton Russell. I live at 1425 Autumn Ridge Drive here in Columbus, and I've been here a long time, and I'm going to stay. First thing is I want to make sure that you understand that my concern is not the constitutionality of it. My concern is the fact that how y'all rushed through the vote on that Tuesday night without any public input, without any public knowledge of what the new language was or is. Now, my example is Ms. Palmore. Her discussion was about the language that y'all did not approve on the 9-1 vote, because nobody knows what was on that 9-1 vote. It was never published. Nobody knows what it is. In fact, I don't know that it's ever been published to the general public at all. If it has, I've missed it, and I kind of been looking. Now, I was told by one of our council members that it was his vote was because he thought it was kind of a housekeeping mess deal. But you know what? The language is so entirely different than what it was the first time and what it's been before. In fact, you know, the mayor has been around with these forums talking about the tax freeze and how lifting the tax freeze was so important, but her sales pitch has been the $6,500 or $6,300, whatever it is, new homestead exemption. That's been the sales pitch, and she did a good job doing that. But the new language removes that extra homestead exemption. There's nothing in there. So what happens now with the new language is supposedly if you're under the freeze, you stay there. If you're not, the new people coming to town will have to burden and pay that extra tax because they won't be under the tax freeze. And we know that the tax assessor's office spends time working to increase the evaluation of property every day. That's what they do for a living, and that's good. So my thing is that it was not public, no input, and I think that y'all ought to reconsider and make sure that it does not go to the legislature as is written, because I don't know anybody who knows exactly what it says except Ms. Thomas says she's got it on her computer. Well, that's good. But the whole thing was a secret. That Tuesday night that y'all voted, it was a secret to the general public, but it was not a secret to some people, because we had people sitting right up here front who must have had a heads up that it was coming up to be voted on, but the general public did not know. I had a conversation with somebody, and it was where I had part of it, but I never knew what the final language was, and I don't think anybody else does as of today. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Appreciate you. We've got one more that wants to speak. I will say, Mr. Russell, I appreciate your concerns, and we will have 8 months to talk about the language. We actually got the language just before it was published to council, I think that afternoon before the meeting. So Legislative Council has a whole lot to do, and we were waiting on them, and we know they're busy and appreciate their service. Next we have Bert Coker. And he would like to speak to us about OCGA 3635-3 and the natatorium. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Bert Coker. I live at 5007 Spyglass Court, Columbus, Georgia, 31909. I'm here to speak about the tax thaw. And last time I was here, I explained to y'all this is the way government works. They call it a tax thaw. I call it a tax defrost. What you do is you set it up, and you try to set it up with a increase in the homestead exemption, but the council at the legislature decided that wasn't the way to do it. So it came back, and y'all tried to revise it, put it in front of the people before, or in front of the council before the people had a chance to look at it. And this is the way you work it. You bring it back, and then you say, well, we're going to vote on it without putting a public input. And that's exactly what you did. And there are certain legalities in the Constitution that doesn't allow for that. Now, a notice containing a synopsis of the proposed amendment shall be published in the official organ of the county of the legal status of the municipal corporation, or in a newspaper of general circulation in the municipal corporation once a week for 3 weeks within a period of 60 days immediately preceding its final adoption. So that was never done that I know of. And the actual language of the referendum was not read. Clearly, you cannot hold any vote in the state capitol where the proper procedure in Georgia state law were not followed. Language and was not even reported to the public through the city newspaper and the council meeting. I strongly urge that you rescind this vote. And also, once you make two classes of people, a class of people who are under the freeze and a class of people who are not under the freeze, that's illegal also. The United States Supreme Court decisions are cited by the Georgia Supreme Court in support of legal principle that different tax rates or exemptions cannot be imposed according to the distinction, and it's 276 Georgia, 332, 338 constitutional amendment on which the current tax freeze is predicated. Section 1 of the bill to be submitted to the General Assembly flatly states that the local constitutional amendment is amended by revising the quoted language in Section 1, then ensues the proposal. The Georgia Constitution flatly forbids the amendments of such local constitutional clauses. Any amendment which is continued in force and effected after July the 1st, 1987, pursuant to the provisions of subparagraph of the paragraph shall be continued in force and effected as a part of this Constitution, except that such amendment may therefore be repealed but may not be amended. Aside from the issues discussed in the preceding paragraph, citizens of Columbus should be concerned about the possibility of an implied repeal of the current tax freeze of the proposed bill in ratifying the November election. The rule on repeals by implication is succinctly stated in Sutton versus Garland, 245 Georgia, 685, 687, 1980, and at least some proponents of the proposed legislation may entertain hopes that the passage of the new bill will produce the irreconcilable conflict with the present tax freeze, so it is to abolish it. That's why I said the last time I was here. The whole purpose of this tax thaw is to make two classes of people. One class under the freeze, one class not under the freeze, so therefore they can go up to the Georgia Supreme Court and bring it up, and they can rule that it's unconstitutional due to the fact that you have two different classes, and therefore they can deem it unconstitutional. But if you keep it as like it is, then everybody who comes to Columbus, Georgia, has a chance to be under the tax freeze. Therefore, everybody it's a constitutional under the by the Supreme Court. They ruled it. You got to understand that the Supreme Court's ruled on this. The voters have voted on it twice, and every time it was voted and ruled in an affirmative. Y'all just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And it's somebody who wants wants it bad enough to keep pushing, just like the TAD, just like the natatorium, just like all the amenities that y'all push for just like the garbage collection fee. I came down and I told you that once you got the 1 day a week garbage collection, then you will push for a higher fee. And what happened? It happened. So this is my ending statement. The natatorium is what it is. It's a white elephant. Y'all cannot take care of it. And we tried to tell you that, or I did, before you build it. You build all these things, and then you don't have the tax money to keep them up. So therefore, what do? You try to lift the freeze to get more tax money into the, I guess, the coffers or whatever you call it. But it's like this. The citizens of Columbus, Georgia pay a lot of taxes. They pay a SPLOST tax, two SPLOST tax, two loss tax, 4% to the state, and then a transportation tax, which we fought a lot. You know, we fought that tooth and nail, and we defeated it sometimes, but y'all finally pushed it through. And all these taxes are a burden on the citizens of Columbus, Georgia. And I'm telling you right now, the burden will break you back. And when you do that, what are you going to do? You can't take care of the natatorium. You can't take care of the skate park. You can't take care of the civic center. You can't take care of the roads. You can't take care of the sanitary drains that are crashing left and right, like on Victory Drive. You just overburden us. And when you do that, the coffers get empty. And when the coffers are empty, what happens to y'all's job? You know? And that's the reason the city doesn't get a pay raise. That's the reason policemen doesn't get their pay raise. And public safety needs a pay raise. Public services need a pay raise. They're begging for new garbage trucks. But the thing about it is when people get dry or taxed too much, they revolt. And that might be what y'all have when you hand the tax revote. That's because of the way y'all did the deal the other day, where y'all decided without the input of the public that you was going to do away with the tax freeze. And that's what this is all about, is doing away with the tax freeze. You're going to have a tax defrost, not a tax thaw. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr. Coker. Just a couple things. The excerpts read by Mr. Coker are actually excerpts related to attempts to amend the charter. The local legislative, or constitutional amendment, I should say, the local constitutional amendment is not part of our charter. So the only way that it can be addressed is through legislative action of the state legislature, which is a process we're going through now, and then, of course, by a vote of the citizens. So those are two separate processes. Also related to the concern that this effort would, quote, repeal or somehow make people who have the freeze lose it. One thing about treating this as an Article 7 issue, as I was stating before, is that it's treating the issue as an exemption. And so even if there were to be something wrong in some way, which we don't believe there is, we think it's a perfectly valid question, and certainly Legislative Council does, it would simply just be whether or not the exemption was properly retired. Wouldn't have anything to do with the underlying constitutional amendment. So again, about the class of two people, I think that helps you understand that it's simply retiring the freeze. If you're in it, you keep it, but that system's retired and no one else can get into it. And then there's a new system going forward. So, without getting into lengthy discussions about the law, I just wanted to state that difference about the process to amend the charter and the process to deal with the local constitutional amendment. All right. Well, that concludes our public agenda. Thank you all for your time this morning. We will head in now to the city manager's agenda. And we've got the Mayor Pro Tem would like to speak. Yes, ma'am.
I want to make a motion that we hear the information as it relates to the TAD districts on 1, 2, and 3, but that no vote be taken today, that would be delayed to next Tuesday.
Okay. That's a motion to continue on with the public hearing, but take no vote. There's a second, and we have discussion from Councilor Thomas.
I wonder if the Mayor Pro Tem would entertain that that it not be next Tuesday. Next Tuesday was the
Special session.
the work session, and we said nothing on that agenda but Parks and Rec. So I wonder if you would entertain to let's do it the next regular council meeting. Would that?
Yes. Okay.
Could we?
Yes.
Well, I mean, we were very insistent that next week be nothing on the agenda but Parks and Rec. So I'd like for us to honor that request, if we could.
Okay. All right. If there's no objection, then it sounds like the motion is to move this to the fourth Tuesday, our meeting on the fourth Tuesday of this month, for purposes of the vote, but to continue forward with the public hearing. And there was a second by Councilor Allen. No further discussion. All those in favor of delaying the vote, please state aye. Any opposed? Okay, Mr. City Manager.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I'm going to have Director Rick Jones to come around and prepare to share with you changes in the boundaries of at least one of the proposed TADs. We've got representatives here representing each of the TADs on the 6th Avenue Liberty District. We've got of course, Ken Blakely here, but we've got Mr. Robert Anderson here from the Liberty. And on the Uptown, we've got President CEO of Uptown, Mr. Richard Bishop here. And on the 2nd Avenue City Village, we've got Justin Krieg here. And so I'm going to turn the microphone over to Director Rick Jones, and he's going to address the 3 TADs, but more specifically, the options for changes in boundary for at least the 6th Avenue Liberty District proposed TAD. So, Mr. Jones.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to be brief in this because of what was the direction we've been asked to go in, or at least the applicants have been asked to go in terms of this, in terms of any changes. Particularly concerned about, I guess, with really the South Commons area more than anything else. At the last conversation we had in dealing with TADs, the idea was really come back with some options, and the applicants have done that. They've come back with really 2, and there really is a third one. The third one is basically as it is proposed today. This is one right now. The one you're looking at here now is actually taking out the entire South Commons area itself from consideration as part of the Liberty District TAD itself. The map that we passed out to you this morning show a larger view of how it actually would tie back in to the Liberty District itself. This is one option here of just basically taking everything out, though, from the South Commons area itself. There's another option that would just take out the Golden Park area itself, and that's shown here. This is the Golden Park area that we're talking about here, actually taking that small section out. The baseball stadium itself would actually come out as one of the alternatives here. And of course, the third one here is really is just to leave it as is or has been proposed really as part of the Liberty District itself. So those are the options or alternatives that have been proposed, and that's for your consideration this morning.
And so, Madam Mayor, we really need a direction from council as to which option related to 6th Avenue Liberty District you prefer, and if we at least have that discussion today, then when it comes back for a vote on the 4th Tuesday, then there would be no need for that discussion. And so we'd like to hear from council.
Okay. We've got several councilors in line. First, we have Councilor Thomas.
Mr. City Manager, Councilor Woodson had to leave, but she asked me to make you aware of her preference would be alternative 2 without Golden Park.
Okay.
She does not favor the one that removes South Commons. I just wanted to pass that to you.
Sure.
Right, Counselor Davis.
I too talked to Council Woodson, and that was her request as well. I could live with both, to be honest with you. I really think that excluding South Commons, if you do not exclude South Commons, then it would really defeat the general purpose of the TAD. And I say that from a standpoint, I think the whole logic behind keeping South Commons in there was the city stated that the possibility that there could be infrastructure improvements in that area. But I would argue the point that the Liberty District needs all the help that it can get, and that all the funding from the TAD should go into the Liberty District. So I would prefer that the city did not use the money out of the TAD for infrastructure and used other appropriate funds to deal with those improvements. So I want the council to understand that in the future that there's a possibility that that pot that would be earmarked for development or redevelopment in the area, economic development, could be tapped into and used for purposes of infrastructure improvements. And again, I say I believe that that defeats the purpose of the TAD in the Liberty District. So that's not all of my reasoning behind excluding South Commons, but like I said, I can live with either or, but I made those statements so council would ultimately be the decision maker here. And Madam Mayor Pro Tem, if I could comment related to that, and certainly we'll live with whatever your decision is, but I'd really like to see us not limit ourselves. In other words, if TAD funding is going to be used in 6th Avenue Liberty District TAD at some future date, it would have to come back before this council for a vote. None of that money could be used on infrastructure or in the Liberty District proper without your approval. And so if you say at this point that you're going to exclude South Commons, then I think, if there is an emergency at some point down the road and TAD funding is available, we've cut ourselves out of that opportunity for that funding resource for infrastructure. By leaving it in, you could still at some point decide that administratively the council is not going to approve use of TAD funding in South Commons, but then if there's an occasion, an emergency that you need to, at least that option is there. If you take it out now, that option will not be there. And I'd ask you to just think about that.
Well, and that's correct, but that's, again, is the purpose and the reasoning behind it. I think the TAD is being created to promote economic development in the Liberty District, not to deal with emergency requests or emergency needs or infrastructure needs for the city in that general area, although it was stated that they could be used. But I wanted to make that point in the Liberty District. I'm not talking about in the other TAD districts, that you're going to have a limited, in my opinion, out of all the TADs, you're going to have a limited source of funding. And if it's used for other purposes, like infrastructure improvements, you're going to be limiting what you can do in other areas of the Liberty District. So
no doubt, Councilor. I'm just simply saying you can decide at that time.
I'm just making that point. That's all.
Because it has to come back before you.
Right. But I respect your opinion on it, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands.
Sure.
Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I agree with the philosophy and the heart of the comments made by Councilor Davis, because right now it's hard to see around the next corner, obviously, but right now I can't imagine a time when I would vote for a plan that gave the city TAD proceeds, being as we don't contribute anything from a tax perspective to the TAD fund. But I don't know. I mean, maybe there's something that comes up that by improving infrastructure either immediately adjacent to or connected to one of those facilities that actually spurs development somewhere just right down the road that is a benefit. So I really don't carry the way. I'm comforted by the fact that any project is ultimately determined by this council, whether or not it's going to be pursued, regardless of where it is in the district. But I agree. I don't have a problem if we cut one or both of those out. I really don't. But if they're in and we were to dispose of one or more of those parcels, then they might be a good target for TAD dollars. So I just can't see us voting any TAD resources to a facility that's not paying into the taxes. So.
All right, Councilor Huff.
I too am on the same page and wanted to request a fourth option to exclude South Commons and Golden Park, because the original lines were there at Victory Drive going back into the Liberty District. And I don't understand a lot of things at this point, but on this particular issue, we have to figure out a way as a city how to run our facilities. And the TAB funding has, I don't think, any, in that area, as Councilor Davis said, it's been hard enough trying to get a plan together, a developer together, trying to get things going in that area. So all funding is needed to stay inside of the Liberty District. So I would ask when you come back if you could create a fourth option to exclude Golden Park and South Commons, please. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Oh, go ahead, Councilor Huff. Did you?
Okay. Director Jones. Alternate 1 says without South Commons, including Golden Park. And they're telling me this is the option, but that's not what it says.
Excluding Golden Park and all of South Commons. We just take it out of the mix altogether.
Okay, that's which option? Alternate. Is it
I
in
think it's
here?
alternate 1, I believe, what we call it. Yes, it's alternate 1.
Alternate 1 says without South Commons, including Golden Park.
Which includes, yes.
And. Oh, the Commons should be and.
I guess so.
South
I mean,
Commons and
if that,
Golden Park.
yes, it's,
Yes?
yes.
Okay.
We're taking out Golden Park and South Commons under this alternate.
Okay, well, I need the comma replaced by an and. Then.
Okay. I can fix that.
Okay, because I mean, at this point in time, everything counts. Okay. So we'll get this in an email or new ECAP?
Yes, sir. We can certainly provide these maps to you by email as well. That's not a
Okay.
problem.
Okay. Thank you.
The Mayor Pro Tem wanted to know, which one did Councilor Woodson say that she wanted of the?
Two.
Number 2. It's number 2. All right. Let's see. We have Councilor Thomas.
It seems like every time we have this conversation, I learn something new about TADs and redevelopment districts. But as I understand, Mr. City Manager, what we're talking about here, if we included South Commons and Golden Park in the redevelopment district, then probably we are not going to do a TAD, we're not going to do a project that covers South Commons and Golden Park. That's city property, and I don't know, Mr. Bleakley may be able to help, that it would even be eligible for a TAD project. But by leaving it in, what it does do is the requirement that says you have to spend TAD dollars in the redevelopment district would give us the option of using TAD dollars for some infrastructure project or whatever. But as with everything else in this, as I believe we have been told, everything has to come back to this council for approval. So if we were to make infrastructure improvements, it would have to come back to this council for that to be approved. But if South Commons and Golden Park are not included in the redevelopment district, then the option of using TAD dollars is no longer there.
That's
Is that
correct.
is that
Absolutely.
a correct statement?
And that's the exact point that I've tried to make. Leave your options open, and that would be my recommendation. But we'll be guided. But we don't know what's going to come up 20 years from now at South Commons. We've got a softball complex down there, of course. It's the Citizens Complex. And so, I just don't see it as city because it's economic impact, it's a city's facility, and 20 years from now, if there's a challenge in revenue and you have a TAD resource sitting there that could further the economic development opportunity for Columbus, it's there. If it's not included, it's not there, it's not an option. You threw that tool away 20 years ago.
So it seems to me that the question that we need to answer is, shall we give ourselves that option or not?
Yes, and should you give ourselves that option or not, and even if you give it to yourself, you don't have to use it,
Right.
is my point.
As I said, every time we talk about this, there's something.
But I'd rather be caught with the option
Absolutely.
than caught without the option.
Thank you.
Is my only point.
All right. Anything further? Oh, yes, Councilor Huff.
Is it not an option also to add it at a later date?
Well, you'd have to go back through a process and do, it creates a whole new dynamic. I can't answer that question. I think Ken Blakely could better answer that question about adding it at a different date. Mr. Blakely, if you don't mind responding to that.
Good morning. The law does allow you to amend the boundaries. You can add property or subtract property in the future. The one fly in the ointment is that when you do that, whatever year you make that change, you then have to bring the tax base up to that year. You restart it basically at that year. So if you had any existing obligations, it becomes really complicated. And if not, you lose all the increment that let's say you created it in 2016, and then in 2020 you amended it, you effectively lose all the increment you acquired from 2016 to 2020 because you'd have to reset it in 2020. So as a rule, generally, we don't see many amendments. You can do it, it's possible, but it's pretty rare around the state.
Because I had heard in a lot of our discussions that some of the boundaries could possibly add on at a later date, because we've approved one TAD already. And that
You
was
can add or
discussed in
subtract.
that they
Correct.
were looking at possibly adding at a later date. So I wanted to know the difference in the one that we approved and what we're talking
It
about
would be
now.
the exact same, the one approved and the others. The only wrinkle, again, is when you make that change, you then reset the tax base to the year you make that amendment. So if you have an area that isn't changing very much, doesn't have much of an impact, but if you have an area that's either declining or growing, then that could be a significant impact. So generally, I would say, 90% of the time we don't see them amended. There are a few examples that have been amended.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right. Anything else?
If I may.
Yes.
Just, this is your vote, but just one comment. All of you remember, I guess we completed about 2 years ago, the flood abatement issue on 6th Avenue.
$37 million.
$37 million. The main trunk line goes through the South Commons. So if you recall, basically the parking lot by the stadium, the football stadium, was shut down. If for some reason, in 10 years from now, there's an issue with that, and it costs a lot of money to deal with it, if the South Commons is in the TAD district, they would be funds available. If the increment has grown, there'd be funds available to deal with that. Just a thought.
All right, Counselor Huff?
My question at this point is, somebody help me with this, Mr. Bleakley, someone. In the city putting our budget together annually, and the money set aside for infrastructure needs, what's the difference in the TAD district having the monies to do the infrastructure projects and the city having the money to do the infrastructure projects?
It's just basically an option. The boundary of the TAD is two things. One, it's an area you hope to generate property tax increases. That's where you get the revenue from. And it's also where you want to spend the money. So, for example, we've had cases in cities that say, well, the bulk of where we're going to generate the money is in these 4 blocks, but we want to connect the streetscape along Fifth Avenue, whatever street it is. So we may want to go another 2 blocks. We don't really think a lot's going to happen in those 2 blocks, but we want to be able to finish the streetscape. So they'll include that area. It just gives you the option in the future to potentially use it. It doesn't obligate you to use it. You might say, gee, we can raise our infrastructure money cheaper through city bonds than we can through TAD. We'll use the city bonds. So it's just a tool that you'll have in your toolkit, and maybe you just decide, we're going to use the other approach. But if you don't include it, you can't spend the money. The basic rule of TADs is you can't spend the money generated in a TAD outside its boundary. And so you're just trying to allow where you think there's a chance you may want to use it, having that option in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and Counselor Henderson?
But just one quick point, though. We do have, as y'all outlined, as a tool for us to be able to kind of change the TAD and reset the baseline. We could, if we saw that there might be a need or there might be an opportunity to develop those streetscapes, we could come back and alter that plan in the future. It just wouldn't take effect until January 1 of the next year.
That's right. You could
That's correct.
reset the base for that, whatever year that was.
But it would reset the base. So if we did
That's
that,
correct.
we'd want to identify that opportunity early in the process and not several years down the road when there's been a collection of TAD monies and then move the line again, right?
Yeah, if the TAD's generating significant increment that you're using for other projects or whatever, then you tend to not want to reset the base.
Right.
If you're sitting there and you really haven't spent anything, the district's there and you're a couple of years into it, Gwinnett did this, then they reset the base. Wasn't a big deal.
And the only reason I bring that up is because we're just into March, and as these things get approved and we start working this year and you guys start identifying potential projects, if something comes before us that is dependent upon a very successful and contiguous streetscapes, to use your example, then we could refigure that probably before the year is out, and we wouldn't lose any real time because the projects wouldn't be able to be evaluated until 17 anyway.
Yeah, and if you got it done before the end of the year, it would still be the 2016
Okay.
base.
Counselor Davis?
Well, Madam Mayor, I yield unless there's any other council members.
No, there's none at this time.
Well, to get this ball rolling, so to speak, I'm going to make a motion that we approve alternative 2, and if it's not approved, then I'll put 1 out on the table to see what council members want to do. And this is just a vote to establish the districts, or excuse me, to amend the district, the Liberty District TAD. I make a motion to accept alternative or alternate 2 that would exclude Golden Park.
Okay, and that's a second by the Mayor Pro Tem, and we have discussion from Counselor Henderson.
No discussion, just clarification. This is simply to allow staff to identify which one to bring forward for the vote in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
All right, I just want to make sure it's
Pops wanted
worded
you to
right.
repeat it, Counselor Davis.
My intention is to get this moving, so what I'm proposing is to amend the Liberty District TAD, and what is on the table is alternative 2 that would exclude Golden Park. And if that doesn't pass, my intention is to put alternative 1 out for a vote.
Okay. All right, and then we had a second, I believe, from, yes, the Mayor Pro Tem, that's correct. And there's no further discussion, so again, this is just on the boundaries. All those in favor of choosing option, what is it, Counselor Davis, again? Counselor, it's option 2. Please state aye. Any opposed? Okay. Unopposed? Tanya, you got that? All right. Counselor Thomas, did you have an opportunity to confer with the city attorney? Do we want to hear from the city attorney on that matter, or we want to leave it to where we're going to run past the...
Well, we can...
Yeah, why don't you just tell counselors what's going on?
We'd prefer just to bring these back for an official vote next week while we're in this 45-day window under the TAD statute, but that would be the only business item. We can delay the zonings until the 4th Tuesday. Is that all right?
So as I understand it, what you shared with me just a moment ago was we need to bring to council's attention, if we don't vote on this next week, then we will have to reissue a notice and wait another period of time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Councilor Thomas.
And I don't have a problem with waiting another period of time. I mean,
Well, we don't want to start over.
So tell us what the ramifications are so council can make a decision.
We need to vote next week so we can stay within all the statutory windows. The last notice goes this week on the TAD, so it'd be preferable to vote next week, and we can delay any other zoning matters till the 4th Tuesday.
Okay. Yes, let's see. We've got Councilor Thomas, then Councilor Barnes, and then Councilor Allen. Yes, ma'am.
if we have absolute, I promise on, whatever penalty or whatever, that this is the only thing that's going to be added to that agenda. We were really adamant about allotting the time to talk about what's going on in Parks and Rec. And if you promise me that this is absolutely it, and you're not going to say, oh, and we've got one other little thing we need to talk about, I'm willing to let's go that way. But it really was that it was to be devoted strictly to Parks and Rec.
Well, and more specifically, Aquatic Center.
Aquatic Center.
I mean, all I intend to bring next week
We understand.
is an Aquatic Center discussion. And if this is added, it would be the only other thing that we're going to be talking about.
This would be the first item up just for a vote.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see then. We had Councilor Barnes. Did you have something? And then Councilor...
In conversation with Councilor Allen, I think I missed what the heck was going on to vote. I'm in opposition to that option 2. That would have been my vote. Option 2, yeah.
Okay.
We were... That's what happened.
Okay. Tiny, can you record that? Is that proper? Okay. All right. And then now we have Councilor Allen.
I was trying to get on there.
Oh, trying to get on that for that purpose. Okay. So do we have to take a revote to put it on the... No, we can just get... I guess there's a consensus that we'll bring that one item, which will be the voting on the TAD, the 3 TAD proposals, back next Tuesday for a vote. Okay. All right. Mr. City Manager?
Well, I think that concludes the discussion about TADs today. So thank you guys for coming. Did you have any other comments? Good. Thank you for coming. See you next Tuesday, 9 o'clock.
Councilor Baker, did you have something before the City Manager continues on?
Yeah, it's not the boundaries.
Sure.
And Mr. City Attorney, I'd asked a while back if you would get with Mr. Jones and just take a look at something to bring back for council's discussion about updating the policies and procedures that addresses other tax incentives and abatements in the TAD areas in addition to the TAD financing, and see if we could make sure there was a prohibition against those or elimination of those.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't...
As far as what else might be out there?
Well, yeah, I just wouldn't want somebody to come in on top of a TAD and then apply for some type of tax abatements, because we couldn't afford to double incentivize, if you will.
Won't be any double dipping.
And the only reason I asked that is I just happened to run across something from the Development Authority the other day on a piece of property, and I don't know if it was inside one of the potential TADs or not, but their boilerplate language in their document mentioned tax incentives and tax abatements. Right. So they need to be updated on whatever language if this council changes it.
Okay.
Good point. All right, Councilor Davis.
And Mayor, that brings up a good point, and we've talked about that in the past, and I view this somewhat as in the future, I'm a little concerned about the staff that we have being able to handle these requests and being able to thoroughly go through them. And we somewhat talked about the need of, if we're going in this direction, of what I would call like a loan officer, somebody who could get in and explore these things and understand exactly the concerns of what Councilor Baker talked about. But there's other incentives out there as well that developers are going to be participating in, and I think that you would want to try to understand to what level developments are going to be incentivized in these areas. So that's a very valid point. As to the question of how many tools are going to be allowed to be used by developers.
Well, I hate that Ken Bleakley left, because I believe that there are some that are not allowed once you have a TAD. So, see, that would be really good information. Does anybody know that? Can anybody catch Ken? Is he? My memory's fuzzy, so I will make this as a referral for you all. But I believe once you have a tax allocation district, you cannot have it's not an enrichment zone, enterprise zone, for instance. So that's my vague recollection, and that's a great question for Ken. So I think there are some you can add and pile on, and there's some you can't add and pile on. But I think it's a very good point that Councilor Baker makes and Councilor Davis reiterates, which is, we need to change all of our contracts with all of our authorities and all of our partners so that we don't end up in a situation where we've offered multiple incentives. So just something forward-looking for our staff, too, to know.
And Mayor, if he can't catch him, I think you were calling him in. If he can't catch him, we'll consider it a referral and get Ken Bleakley to respond to that question.
Yeah, and one thing, just to add, during your due diligence on every project, you will be able to quiz the applicant on what other incentives they have, and if it's contrary to what you think is right, you don't have to approve the project for that. So, but we'll get with Ken to see if we can get a better answer. But
okay.
We appreciate this opportunity, and just want y'all to think about that when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare, and that's all we're trying to do is help our community be prepared for opportunities. So thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, Madam Mayor, I'll move on with the rest of my agenda. I've got a contract between the City and Board of Regents of the University System of Georgia for the UGA Cooperative Extension. We have had this agreement with them for more than 30 years, and this is a continuation of the agreement, but just in a slightly different way, where the money would pass through the regents, and then they will bill us for the partial pro rata share of salary of one of the extension agents. So we're requesting the Board of Regents of the University System of Georgia, on behalf of University of Georgia Cooperative Extension Service and Columbus Consolidated Government, to enter into a contract to pay salary, optional retirement, and Social Security medical costs for the county extension agent. The employee, as I said, is currently paid a portion from the city and a portion from UGA. And so after March 1st, of course, if you approve this, the employee will be paid by UGA and the city will be billed for the city portion. So there's no difference if Pam tells me that there's a few dollars less that would cost us because of the retirement system, but it's money that we are currently paying in a relationship that we've done for more than 30 years.
All right. I heard a second, so I assume there was a motion. Councilor Henderson with the motion. There is no discussion, so I will cue it for electronic vote. You may record your vote. All right, and it does pass.
Next, I've got the Bicycle Columbus. They're providing a donation to the city. It's
We got a motion for approval and a second. Hold on just a second. It's a, would you like to say something? We've got a few folks here.
Let me just say that it's $1,020, and it's for 30 road signs that display the state's 3-foot pass for bicyclists riding on roadways. They are being generous enough to donate that money to us that we can then turn around and purchase those signs, install those signs, and make the pathways safer. And so we have Kip Logan here and from the city, and Trip Layfield, who's a citizen, and that's the sign that we would be purchasing and installing. You don't have to say anything, but we appreciate the money, and when you pay money, you have a right to say something.
Thank you for accepting our donation.
Well, and you're more than just a citizen to us, Trip.
Thank you.
No, seriously, thank you for what you did. We appreciate it. Anything else? Okay, we've got Councilor Henderson, yes.
Well, and while we have Trip here, I would love your input on this. This is completely unrelated to this topic, and I apologize for stepping in the middle of your agenda, but I noticed that I'm pleased to see we're getting all the bike lane striping put in so that we've got a very clear delineation on where people are supposed to be as they share the roads and different methods of transportation. But I got to confess, as I went down 10th, that was one striping that I just thought, man, that looks like a recipe for disaster for both the bikers and the automobiles. It looked to me like the bike lane is on the inside. Then they've put parking spaces right next to that, and then there's the road. So I was thinking that means if somebody with a passenger parks, he could wipe out a car and a biker at one time, both of them opening the doors. It just seemed to me like it's safer to put the parking all the way on the edge and the cyclists that are already comfortable sharing the road on the inside. I don't know. I'd be interested in your feedback. Y'all have seen it in other communities.
You're talking about 10th Street.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Henderson, as with everything, there's multiple opinions, and I will give the city planning department and the traffic engineering department credit. I mean, they came to all of the interested parties, gathered opinions, of which there were several, and ended up adding the infrastructure as you see it striped. You know, my personal opinion is that some infrastructure there is better than none at all.
Right. No, I agree.
So from that standpoint, we're happy to see that the city's put the infrastructure in place.
So y'all didn't have any opinion then on where it should be, how it should be configured? You wanted that particular configuration?
When you say me,
I'm sorry, the bicycling community.
Bicycle Columbus, I'm a volunteer board member of Bicycle Columbus, an advocacy organization here in town, one of many that are involved in the numerous activities that are currently underway. Path Foundation, Community Foundation, Gale Studio, the Planning Department, Traffic Engineering Department. Doc Dorsey did come to a Bicycle Columbus board meeting and present to us options. And yes, we did express an opinion to him. And based on the options presented to us, we did support the option that Doc brought to us that I think ultimately ended up on 10th Street.
Like I said, I was just curious as I went through there. I had never seen that configuration, not just here, but in other communities where they're actively, promoting bicycling. All right, thanks.
Okay.
Well,
go ahead.
If you see Councilor Henderson driving on 10th, get out of the way.
You're right.
Yes, thank you. Open your doors. Thank you again.
Thank you. All right, well, I think we've still got to take the vote, so don't go anywhere. You never know. All right, you can record your votes electronically. All right, and it does pass.
Actually have 3 grants. The Georgia Local Workforce Development Agency Strategic Programming Grant. There's an Operation Workforce Transition and Military Assistance Grant for $300,000.
Got a motion and second for approval. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please record your vote by pressing green. If you're opposed, press red. Thank you. It passes.
And I do want to say that this grant is for the expansion of career services and innovative workforce development programs for transitioning service members, veterans recently transitioned, their spouse and children. I figure Councilor Barnes would be happy to hear the rest of that story. And there's no local match required for these three grants. The second grant is for ex-offenders and from the same organization.
All right. We've got a motion and a second, and there appears to be no discussion. You may record your votes electronically.
And that's $125,000 with no local match.
I think we are missing one more. Is that it? Okay, yeah, there we go. We're good. Thank you. Okay.
And the next grant is the Go Build Georgia Pre-Apprenticeship. It's $75,000, and it's to expand basic and employability skills, in-demand employment training, and innovative workforce development programs for high school seniors eligible for dual enrollment and considered low income and deficient in basic literacy skills. And there's no
got a motion and a second for approval. There appears to be no further discussion, and you may record your vote electronically. It passes.
And then we've got purchases. First is a replacement vehicles for the Columbus Police Department. It's 3 Chevrolet Tahoes, 2-wheel drive.
We've got a motion and second to approve item number A, which is Chevrolet Tahoe's 2-wheel drive police pursuit vehicles pursuant to the Georgia State contract. Seeing no discussion, you may record your votes electronically. It passes. Okay. Okay. We've got a motion, a second, that B through G be approved. And Mr. City Manager, if you would, please just read each one.
B is a new vehicle for Columbus Police Department. It's a 2016 Ford 150 truck. C is a washer extractor for Muskogee County Jail. It's a replacement. D, geotechnical and environmental testing services, annual contract. E, treatment providers for mental court and veterans court, annual contract. And amend a contract term for elevator maintenance service, and then a change order for South Lumpkin Road multi-purpose trail.
Okay. So that was a motion and second to approve those stated items. And there is no discussion, so you may record your votes electronically. It passes. Those pass.
Moving into updates, we've got the Finance Monthly update by Deputy City Manager Pam Hodge.
Like to.
Ms. City Manager, before we go into the updates, could you have the staff look into it just seems like there's a problem that seems to be unfriendly to business in our community, and what I would ask you to do is to have staff, including the legal department and all those associated, if they could come up with more of a streamlined version of the requirements and the guidelines, step by step maybe, of what it takes to start a food truck business. And in looking at that, if there needs to be some things, and I'll put this in a formal referral, if there needs to be some things that need to be worked on, I'd like to bring that discussion back up, or I'd like to have that discussion again. There's been numerous requests, but we don't seem to be making any progress. And mainly in those discussions with business owners, prospective business owners, they always talk about it doesn't matter who they talk to, they get a different story from each person. So it just occurred to me that we find a better way to streamline this process. So if a business wants to do it, we can just give them a sheet of paper and they'll know exactly what to do. I don't want to make it sound that easy, but you understand what I'm saying. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Pam?
Good morning. I apologize for my voice this morning. This is our January 2016 report. This was delayed from the last meeting. The general fund up 0.34%. The local option sales tax is down 1.14%, but we have collected February's, and it was lower than last year, so we're at year-to-date at the end of February 1.91% down from last year. The other local option sales tax fund, which includes interest, this is showing down 0.98%. After February, it's down 1.82%. So we had further reduction this past month. The stormwater fund, basically even at 0.42%. Paving fund, down 0.30%. Medical center, up 0.56%. Integrated waste, down negative 0.67%. E911 down 0.33%. And you can see that most of these funds are basically at the same point where we were last year. Economic development up 1.58%. Debt service up 5.98%. And this is due to the addition of the GMA lease program, so there's an additional revenue from the other loss for the tax assessor system. Transportation up 2.78%. Parking management up 37.73%, and that's due to the fact the parking fines went up from $20 to $30. And if you notice on parking management as well as the rest of the funds going forward, which are enterprise funds, revenue for parking management is $168,000, and expenditures were at $178,000. So real close to breaking even for parking management. Trade center fund up 16.76%. And again, when you look at revenues compared to expenditures, the revenues at $1,444,000 and expenditures at $1,448,000. So really close, within $4,000. Bull Creek down 1.62%. Bull Creek's revenue at $621,000 and expenditures at $698,000. So about a $70,000 difference in revenues and expenditures. Oxbow down 13.49%, and this you can see the spread a lot greater. Revenues at $114,000 and expenditures at $231,000. The Civic Center Fund revenues up 36.47%. Revenues at $2.9, just under $3 million, and expenditures at $3.2 million. So within about $250,000 difference in revenues and expenditures for the Civic Center. The Health Insurance Fund down 10.87%, but remember that the Muskogee Manor is no longer on our plan, which accounts for the majority of this change in revenue. Revenues at 10.8 and expenditures at 13.3, but now we're getting into the portion of the year where the deductible kicks in, so we'll see how that tracks going forward. If you look at the expenditure report at the end of January, most departments are within budget. There are a few that are exceeding budget, and there are explanations provided for those. Some of those being the City Council, but their annual dues for GMA and ACCG are due once a year, not prorated out over the month, so there's no issue with City Council. The City Attorney's, the litigation budget, defending over $12 million in claims, that's exceeded the budget this year. Employee benefits, the annual contribution for death benefit and major disability is a one-time payment, and so that's no issues with employee benefits. The jury manager has a subscription that's due at the beginning of the year, which has caused that to be over the budget, but no issue for the remainder of the year. And the public defender, the monthly contract is paid in advance, so it's showing them a little bit over where they should be, but that's expected. And on the other local option sales tax, which we've talked about briefly, their revenues are down 0.98% this year. After next month, it'll be 1.82%. But the report indicates by department how much has been expended in each of the different departments and agencies of the local option sales tax. And I've also provided the report on the infrastructure projects for the other lost. On the T-SPLOST discretionary, we're averaging about $217,000 a month. This fiscal year, we've collected $1.3 million for a 6-month period of time. So we're right on track to meet the budget or exceed the budget of $2.5 million for discretionary for this fiscal year. The current projects have been allocated as Boxwood Boulevard Bridge replacement, the Victory Drive improvements, and resurfacing. And we'll be bringing back that project list that was talked about a few meetings ago for additional approval so we can move forward with additional T-SPLOST discretionary projects. We've collected $7.4 million to date in discretionary funds, allocated $2,755,000. So we have a balance of $4.7 million that has not been approved as a project, and those will be coming back to council at the next meeting. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Huff.
Question. I had asked council to consider assisting me. The speed table list, there's a list out there. But I have an emergency request, and I'm just trying to figure out how to get it done. We've had another accident since I reported the last one where the car crashed into the house for about the third or fourth time. This time it luckily hit the phone pole, and did not end up in the yard. So I'm assuming they are racing or something from Old Casita Road down into the neighborhood. And traveling around town, I went around Columbus last week to kind of get into areas that had speed tables, had long stretches of road. And I just need, your assistance and the council's assistance to look into this and see if we can move it up and get it done.
And we did have traffic calming on the allocation of the projects that we brought at the 2 meetings ago. Okay. And the ones that we have currently on the list, and I don't know if your particular project has currently been evaluated and on the list, but we would have funding available in the next 2 years to pay for those that are currently on the list, and we can look at the one that you're referring to and make sure it's on the list.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and also, Mr. Huff, if you will text me that address. I know we've talked about it several times, but I will get it to the chief in the interim and ask that we have motor patrol there, okay? Councilor Davis.
Yes, Ms. Hodge, could you tell me off kind of a random question here, but what has the city budgeted this year for fuel costs, both gasoline and diesel? Do you have any
I don't have that off the top of my head, but we can provide that to you.
Is that's established in the budget across the board, though, right?
That's correct.
When you're going through the budget process, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Anything else for Pam? Okay. City Manager.
We'll move on. The next topic is Insurance Service Organization Building Code Grading Effectiveness. And Deputy City Manager Hodge is going to give that report, that update to you as well.
And this is just to bring council up to date. Every 5 years, the ISO evaluates the building code effectiveness grading schedule, And this is not to be confused with the ISO for fire. There are two completely separate evaluations. The insurance companies use this to evaluate policies for homeowners. They look mostly at the ISO fire, and what our understanding is this used to play a much bigger part in the evaluation of homeowner insurance as far as building codes are concerned. Not so much now. They're looking mostly at the ISO fire. But we wanted to give you the update. We've been evaluated and where we've changed and what our plan is to improve that evaluation. And again, the purpose of ISO assesses the building codes that are in effect, emphasizes the requirements designed to mitigate losses from natural hazards, and to make sure that the community's classification is evaluated every 5 years. And I've notated at the bottom on almost every slide that this is not to be confused with the ISO fire rating. These are completely separate ratings. There's been no change to the ISO fire rating. This would only impact residential and commercial going forward after January 1, 2016. It's an advisory rating agency for the property and casualty insurance industry, and it's a credit-only program. What our residential rating, we are currently at a 5. We were previously a 2 for residential. Just to give you an idea, the scoring, we had 64.47 points in 2015. In 2010, we had 85.34. And we'll kind of walk through, and I think I've passed out that information to you, but we'll kind of walk through the differences in the ratings. In commercial, we were previously a 3, and now we're a 4. And the scoring difference is 73.53 versus 81.83. And this just shows the table of the classifications to show you that as a 64.47, we are a half a point away from being a 4. So we're very close to that next range. And this is before the new classifications. And you can see that the light colored is the personal lines and the darker color orange is the commercial lines. And before we were a 1, we were a 2 and a 3. So the only only municipality in the state of Georgia that was a 2 was the city of Columbus, and we were 1 of 2 in the commercial rating. And now we're at a 4 and a 5, which is basically within the average of the rest of the state of Georgia. And this just shows the national comparison that there are very few 2s and 3s, and that the majority is 4s and 5s, which is currently where we're at. The areas of evaluation, they look at the administration of code, the plan review, and the field inspections. And John Hutchison is here if you've got any questions specific to this and how our rating is as well.
Okay. And we have a question from Councilor Allen.
Okay, this is, even though it's ISO and it's same as the fire rating, it's measuring our ability to properly conduct the Office of Building and Codes. It's a measurement on that office. Is that what this is?
It's a measurement on that office compared to other municipalities in the state and the nation.
All right, but it does affect commercial property insurance rates.
Our understanding is that, and from the ones that we've talked to, the majority of them look at the fire ISO rating and not so much this. They used to in the past. This used to play a much important role in the evaluation, but not so much anymore.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. John, I'm sorry, go ahead, Pam.
The major areas of difference between 2010 and 2015 was the building official certification, the training and certification of the staff, and with higher turnover of seasoned employees over the last 5 years to retirement and better paying private opportunities, and then the use of checklists. So we went back and looked at their evaluation for 2010 and the evaluation for 2015, and really looked at the major changes in how we were rated prior to 2015. And these were the three things that are really the main differences.
What is use of checklists?
Let's see, hold on.
What they're looking for is when you go out to do an inspection, you have a checklist that you actually check off. I did these things when I was there. They were really looking for those types of checklists.
You want to show it?
And we do have an example of
And they want you to have those.
yes, they want to see those in the file, and they want to know that the inspectors are using that list.
And this is our typical checklist for residential inspections. So we go through our footing inspections, our foundations, our framing inspections. We have them on file, but a lot of times with our inspectors, every job is different. So if you go in, depending on a checklist, and if there's something outside of this checklist that is wrong, we don't want to train the inspectors just to only focus on the checklist. So they are there. We have for residential and commercial, and it's just we have to show them that we have a checklist, which we do. So it's not anything that we didn't have or didn't have before, because this is before I came aboard. It was already here. So it's just providing that information to ISO.
So you've always operated with the checklist?
Yes, sir. Because that was typed up way back when. It's in the books and everyone has it.
And so our plan, and this is really what John and I have kind of worked on just over the last several months, is to improve our rating. Obviously, we hate to see that our rating decline from a prior rating, is to obtain the CBO certification for the interim director. He has passed 2 of the 3 parts. He has 1 more part to take, and that will be in April. So that will make changes.
And he passed them both on the first try?
He did pass the first 2 parts, the harder parts on the first try. So he has 1 more part left to take, and that will be next month. And also to develop a certification training plan for each staff member. That was one of the things that we saw in comparing the prior year, is how many certification and training classes that prior inspectors who had been there a very long time had earned over time. So what we want to do is develop that certification plan for each staff member, not just to improve our rating, but to provide that training for the staff and to provide a better service to the citizens. And implement fully the residential and plan review checklist to make sure that they're in the file for each inspection. And then to request ISO to do a reevaluation in 2016. We feel that we could implement these changes by the end of this year and have them come back and do a reevaluation. They typically do that every 5 years, but they will come back at your request. And we do think that our evaluation will change. Maybe not back to where it was before, but definitely improved to where it is right now. And so we just wanted to give you an update of that evaluation that we had from ISO and answer any questions that you might have.
Councilor Allen.
I wanted to follow up on your point about the certification training plan. I know we had a few employees that left because of certain certifications had not been met. Have we filled those positions, and are those who are filling those positions, are they certified?
Yes, we just brought on, well, in my position, like I said, I have 1 more test to have this certified for a certified building official. All of my plans examiners and all of my current existing inspectors have their certifications. We have 2 that are coming up this year, and then they have that timeline to get their certification. And we just hired a new, that'll be coming aboard, a new plumbing inspector, and then he has 2 years to earn his plumbing certification and 3 years to earn his mechanical certification. One of the biggest things is a lot of trade guys that come in to become inspectors, they don't have these certifications. It doesn't benefit them in the private sector. Right. So a lot of times coming in, they have some knowledge of the codes, But like I said, just to being tested on an actual letter of the code, they don't have that, and it doesn't benefit them before they come to the city. So we have timelines set in, and once they come in, they sign a sheet understanding that they have the 2 years or 3 years, depending on what the certifications are, to get the certification.
Okay.
And it's a condition of their employment.
Thanks, sir.
All right. Anything else?
Thank you. Next, we have the Mr. John Williams, Deputy Chief Appraisal, and Steve Wise from Tyler Technologies, Inc. Council last year or so approved funding to upgrade our technology for tax assessor and tax commissioner. They have been working and scheduled to go live January 1, 2017, I believe. They've been out in the field getting everything going and transferring from the old system, Oasis, to the IAS World. We wanted you to kind of hear from them as to where they are with things. And so, John.
City Manager, thank you. You know me, I'm John Williams. This is Steve Wise. He is the on-site project manager for what happens here in Columbus. Last time we were here, we had Mary Griffin, who was also Steve's boss, who was here. Don't need her today. We're well into it. I asked Steve to give us something that we could put up on one screen, a timeline that simplifies exactly what we're doing in this project and where we're at. We get the question often about why can't we know this? Why does it have to be 1/1/17? Why can't we get values earlier than that? So I thought the easiest way to do this is put it on a timeline, let Steve talk through the timeline with you as simply as we can, make it as the least confusing as possible, and then we'll answer those questions. Steve?
Good morning, Council. As John stated, I am the project manager for Tyler Technologies, overseeing the 2017 revaluation project for Muskogee County. John and I put a timeline together, as you can see on the board, briefly just to explain some of the target dates, the percentages complete as far as what we've completed so far, and then the stages of completion between now and project in at fruition. Basically, the project started January 1st, 2015. We took the first 3 months of the project and shot all of the street level images on every improved parcel within the county. From June through November 2015, the appraisal desktop verification ADV system was utilized and reviewed all the parcels. ADV review resulted in 35% of the total parcel count requiring some type of edit or change that we had noticed. Of those edits, 29% were simple data entry changes, such as an improvement being added, or there might have been something that needed to be changed or removed from the parcel. 6% of those edits required a field check. The edits are currently 45% complete as of today, and those will all be completed and entered into the IAS test site by the end of April 2016. The next 4 stages will be completed between a time frame between April and June of 2016. We will analyze and validate all sales from 2014, 15, and 16, and only those sales that are bona fide arm's length transactions will be used to determine the market value. These verified sales then become the basis of our land valuation. Location factors are then established based on these land valuations and grouped into neighborhood boundaries. Cost tables are then built and calibrated using data collected from the sales analysis. Local, regional, and national cost data is utilized, and when available, newly constructed dwellings are also used to develop these tables. The next 10 months will be spent developing property valuations using the applicable approaches to value. Final review and valuation will be conducted by licensed Georgia appraisers to ensure quality, accuracy, uniformity, and equity throughout the county. These valuation results are presented to the chief appraiser for the county staff to review, who then deliver these values to the Board of Assessors for final approval sometime in May of 2017. Once all values are reviewed and approved by the board, the annual notice of assessment is mailed to each property owner. The owner has 45 days from the date of the notice to file an appeal to dispute their value. Tyler Technologies will be responsible for reviewing all the appeals from August through December 2017. Once appeals are complete, a mass appraisal report summarizing the reassessment project will be provided and delivered to the chief appraiser. So that kind of gives you a rough idea of the stages of the process that we have in the reassessment project. As you can see, based on our graph, we're roughly 25% or so finished with the first few stages of the project. We're in the kind of the cleanup phase, so to speak. We're continuing to make those changes in the system into the test site. So,
Let me just correct that last statement. That chart represents 25, those green bars, that's 25% of the project is complete. So what he's done is convert all the data that we've had in OASIS to the new system. They've basically double-checked themselves to maintain accuracy. This data entry edits that we're in the process of doing should be finished by April, end of April. Steve, what was the number? I think, by my recollection, it's about 33 to 35% of the parcels that we looked at, both commercially and residentially, had some form of edit that was something in addition or subtraction of that parcel as we had it. Could be a shed, could be an attached carport. It's typically something that doesn't require a permit, because we get permits on a regular basis, and so we know what's been added by permit almost always. If we don't, there's been a flaw. But what he's picking up is things that don't necessarily require a permit, but they're there. We use a shed, for example. It's there. We see it on the aerial. He sends somebody out, takes a picture of it if we didn't get it first shot, and then we measure that and try to put that back in the system to be valued down the road in this project. The 1/1/17 date, that is an as-of date for the valuations of the properties here in the county. Currently, we have 69,507 taxable real property parcels in the county. That doesn't include it does include what is known as the H account, that property that is over 2 acres for certain residential properties. 69,507. Got that this morning. That's why I know exactly what the number is. Of those parcels, approximately, well, I've got the number exactly. It's 35,014. 35,014 of those parcels have homestead exemption. It's about half, just slightly over 50%.
Give us the number one more time. I've got the 65.
Well, and remember, I'm going to ask that he email
Yeah.
that
Okay.
information to me, and then I can send it to you, because when I met with them, they broke it all down
Yeah.
for me, and I want you to have that information, and that's why I put them on the agenda.
Sure.
So
John, if you just give that number.
Sure.
The last one.
The homestead exemption at parcels, 35,014.
Yeah.
The information you're speaking of, Mr. City Manager, we've got it in great detail. We've got that information in great detail. I didn't see it, and I apologize if that's exactly what you wanted. I can email that out when I get back to my office. But there
If you
are
email it to me,
very
I'll get it to
specific numbers. I'll send that to you as to what the percentages are that's been added. But the question is, if we know the value on 1/1/17, why can't we know the value on 12/1/16? That 1/1/17 is an effective date for the values. We use sales all the way up into December to add to that effective date value at 1/1/17. But we don't know that value as of 1/1/17. That's just the date we look at the value of the property. We take the next 5 months to churn that information to the point where we can present it to the Board of Assessors for their approval. That's the board that you all elected. They're the ones that come up and say that is the value of the property. My goal is 1 May. In previous years, it was end of May, even into June. So we're backing that up. This year was one of the earliest years we've had. We'll continue to try to push that back closer to the beginning of the year, but by and large, that's April and May timeframe. Then we send the notices out. Then every taxpayer or property owner has the right to appeal. So those values go through an appeal process, and we don't really know what the ending value will be until late in the year. So I hope that answers that one question about why can't we know it earlier. That is the effective date in the contract of those values, and we have to wait up to that point.
We have several counselors in queue, and John, I appreciate the process. Anything you can do to get that number, a number to us, a projected number to us earlier in the year, any given year, because it's really difficult to build the budget when we call and the response is we have no idea. We don't know if it's 0, 10%. We just have no idea.
Right.
And I know you guys then do try to drill down a little bit and get, and you've done a good job, but it would be nice to be able to have you give us a number earlier for budget purposes.
We will certainly know the digest number in 2016, probably third quarter, usually July, August timeframe. Of course, that goes to the commissioner's office, and then they present that. But we'll have that 16 number.
And we
in
know
advance.
it's a projection. That's not. We're not trying to. It's just. It's hard to build a budget when we don't have a projection.
Sure.
So, Councilor Thomas.
Excuse me. Ms. Williams, it seems to me when we started talking about this, one of the things that we were told would be that we would receive from this is that there may be parcels that are not on the tax rolls. And I don't know enough about the terminology to know if we are to the point where some of those may have been identified. If we are, did we find a lot? I mean, I know that was one of the issues that was one of the concerns. Are we to that point yet in in your timeline?
We are through with the field checks, which are